What makes a good physique? From the ancient Greeks to our modern beauty standards, the consensus hasn't changed. What makes a man formidable is the V-taper, the alliance of wide shoulders and flared lats. With or without shirt, this look is the masculine aesthetic, which explains why it is also the most coveted attribute to develop for any male setting foot in the gym. But what if I told you that you don't need weights to achieve it? What if there was a sport out there that could flawlessly produce V-tapers without even the need of equipment? Well, this sport exists, and its name is swimming, an activity that our ancestors have been doing for 100,000 years. It is said that humans cannot fly, but that the closest they come to it is swimming. And when you consider the amount of muscles it takes for a human body to take off, you understand better why the action of treading water could develop such bodies. But how? How can a low-impact sport such as swimming build such sculpted physiques? And what can explain its uncanny ability to create crazy V-tapers? In short, why are swimmers so aesthetic? There are four main styles of swimming: freestyle, backstroke, breaststroke, and butterfly. The first thing you'll notice is that they're all upper body focused, meaning that the bulk of the traction produced by the body comes from its top half. This is for a simple reason. The joints of the legs lack the necessary range of motion to produce the power needed to swim fast. On top of that, the muscles of the quads and hams being massive, they also consume up to 3 times more oxygen, leading to a lot more lactic acid buildup. This explains why the lower body of swimmers lags so far behind our torso. The leg kick movement that helps propel the athletes forward and keep them from sinking requires minimal knee bend, leaving the muscles relatively untrained. However, the same is not true for the core. The constant hip movements required of swimmers puts a tremendous amount of stress on the abs, explaining why they often rock a six-pack without ever doing a single sit-up. And that's only from the byproduct of leg propulsion, the strenuous underwater arm movements producing an even more outstanding effect. Stand up and rotate your arm at the shoulder 360 degrees. Now lay on a bench and do the same thing. You'll notice that the movement becomes immediately more difficult because the point of peak gravity now occurs when your shoulder is still in extension, putting a lot more stress on it. Now replicate the same movement while holding a 5-pound plate. Most people can't even last 1 minute. This is the magic of freestyle. By repeatedly rotating the arm with minimal elbow bend, the muscles of the shoulders are forced to fight against the resistance offered by the water, creating a stressful environment that triggers growth. This is also why the most common injury in swimming is rotator cuff related, the backstroke serving to balance out the type of stimulus received by focusing instead on shoulder flexion, the anatomy of the joint allowing for more forward range of motion. With these two, you have the perfect combo. Every single head of the shoulder gets hit, explaining the crazy coconut delts of swimmers. But it doesn't stop there. While the shoulders produce most of the power, the muscles of the back also play a key role. Every time the arms shift underwater, the lats, rhomboids, and teres major and minor are also firing up. The best example being the butterfly. By violently transitioning from adduction to extension, the muscles of the shoulders are forced to work together with that of the back in order to protect the rotator cuffs from annihilation. It's no surprise why this style is described as the most advanced method of swimming. While it will totally blow up your back and delts, it could just as easily destroy your body. And this is where the true magic of swimming lays. By making these movements in water, you not only increase stress on the muscles, but also reduce the impact on the tendons, allowing you to take in much more volume than you'll normally be able to. And since every swimming style is like a compound movement of its own, it's no wonder why these athletes look so good without weights. Of course, it doesn't mean that these guys don't hit the gym. Every serious sportsman does. But most of their volume still occurs in the pool, which doesn't stop muscles like the long head of the triceps or the chest to be weirdly developed on their physiques. Even their necks and lower backs aren't lagging too far behind. A mystery until you realize that swimming is one of the most time-intensive sports in existence. Average water time for competitors is 2 to 4 hours a day. That represents at least 15 hours a week fighting against the gravity of your own body. Regardless of how small the stimulus might be, if the movement is repeated enough time, the muscle will grow. This is how the simple action of bringing the arms close to the body in the breaststroke grows such powerful chests, and why the constant struggle to keep the head out of the water in the butterfly manages to create thick traps and necks. It is this strenuous regimen that gives birth to the swimmer physique, a specific shape that marries upper body mass and leanness, and that no amount of bodybuilding could replicate. This makes swimming one of the best hobbies out there if your goal is to slim out and build muscle, relegating running to the rank of subpar cardio option. This also explains why swimmers have such low body fat. Not only do they want to stay light to swim fast, but on top of that, they couldn't get fat if they tried. Michael Phelps famously consumed upwards of 12,000 calories per day, which is 6 times more than the average adult male requires. At 6'4", Phelps also only weighed about 200 pounds, with the average weight for Olympic swimmers being 180 pounds. Bodybuilders eat to enter a caloric surplus and build muscle. Swimmers eat in order to survive in the water. And the same goes for their training. No swimmer goes through that much pool time for the sole purpose of building their real delt. The hypertrophy is simply a byproduct of the killer mindset required to compete at the highest level of this crazy sport. Regardless of how talented you are, you can't compete in swimming without volume. Most bodybuilders will do between 10 to 30 sets of exercises for one muscle in a week, with between 6 to 15 reps each. That's skewed to swimmers. For an advanced athlete, it isn't unheard of to swim upwards of 50 laps per session, with 2 sessions a day, every day. If one lap takes around 15 to 30 strokes to complete, you're looking at 1,500 reps a day at the minimum. Spending this much time repeating the same motion is in a sense a form of torture, both for the mind and the muscles. And it takes a special kind of madness to be able to put in that much effort doing the same thing every day. But it also explains why this sport manages to change the body of swimmers, to the point that it could almost be described as a form of natural transmutation. Most competitive swimmers begin training when they're between 6 and 8 years old. Those without discipline quickly getting filtered by the unforgiving nature of the sport. By the time they enter high school, their life revolves around the pool. The first thing they do upon waking up is swim, and they almost spend more hours wet than dry. Watch any video relating the daily routine of a college swimmer and you'll know what I mean. With the amount of time they spend in the water, it's a wonder they don't grow webbed toes. For most people, the pool is a fun summertime activity, to be enjoyed for 10 to 20 minutes at a time. For these guys, it's their second home, to the point that it isn't unheard of for them to develop swimming fatigue, leading many gold medalist athletes to quit the sport entirely and to refuse to enter the water even after retirement. When the body spends that much time specializing in an activity, it changes, not just in terms of muscle mass, but even in regards to its very structure. That's how epigenetics work. As such, the claim that swimmers don't look like that because they swim because they look like that is entirely false. While certain body types have a definitive advantage when it comes to the sport and will therefore be more common at the top level, anyone who spends enough time in a pool will develop the attributes specific to the sport. If you've been to a swim meet, you know what I mean. While some people will have naturally longer torsos or wider clavicles, you'd have a tough time finding anyone with small shoulders or without a solid V-taper. The proof is also in the big difference in body shapes that exist between distance swimmers and sprinters. While the former tend to be lankier, with smaller arms and chests, the latter are often built like tanks. This is due to the different demands of their sport. The more mass you carry, the less endurant you are, and the more difficult it becomes to swim long distances. But all this extra meat on your shoulders and back also allow for a faster lap time. The ultimate example of this reality is Olympic divers. When you think of auto mode, this is the physique that comes to mind. Very little muscle mass in the chest and arms, but a well-developed core and surprisingly strong legs. All the ingredients you need to jump efficiently, then twist and spin in the air. And yet, who would think that the action of jumping into a pool could sculpt such bodies? Times and times again, humans have prevailed because of our ability to adapt to the environment, and muscles are no exception. If we returned to the seas and became marine mammals again, our legs and glutes would probably atrophy and turn back into a tail, while our backs and shoulders would grow and eventually make way for a dorsal hump and pectoral flippers. Thankfully for you, this transformation would take a few million years, so you don't have to worry about turning into a killer whale after swimming 3 laps at your local pool, but you'll still get to enjoy capped shoulders and a nice taper. So why don't we all do it? If swimming is the magic formula for a crazy V-taper, why do gym bros everywhere still bother doing their lat pull downs and lateral raises? Well, it's simple. It's more time efficient. Yes, competitive swimmers end up with aesthetic physiques, but at what cost? If the price to pay for rounder shoulders is to sacrifice half of your waking life to the pool gods, most people would be better served training for hypertrophy instead. The proof is that even swimmers themselves do these weightlifting exercises when they're trying to put on mass, since 10 reps of weighted pull-ups will always yield better results than 100 backstrokes. So until the day some genius comes up with weighted swimming, which will also likely be the last of his ideas, then a good old lifting routine will always be better. And the same goes for volume. While swimming laps upon laps is an absolute necessity for their sport, since it's also what they'll be expected to do come competition time, this amount of work is clearly counterindicated for anyone who isn't a competitive swimmer. In a sense, this type of training is the anti-HIIT. It's low intensity, high volume, high frequency work, designed for the sole purpose of turning you into the perfect swimming machine. While no one can pretend that it doesn't work for building muscle, it's always good to keep in mind that we've come up with resistance training for a reason, because it is a much faster and efficient way to put on mass for the general population. Some will prefer the pool, because swimming relaxes them, or because they find weights boring. And that's fine. Both pursuits are noble, and both will require work. But if your goal is only to look more aesthetic, don't buy into the hype. Swimming isn't the shortcut to a great physique that some people try to pass it as, unless you consider jumping in the waters of the canal a somehow faster alternative than walking the bridge that crosses it. So if your dream is bigger biceps, keep your feet dry and your mind sane, and stay away from the pool.